Hey guys, it's Ty here. We're back for another video of Start Talking Alabama. Today I'll be talking to a friend of mine who is a long-term survivor of HIV. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
Thanks, we're so glad that you could be here today. If you could briefly, just give us a short bio of who you are, where you're from, and how long have you been living with HIV?
Well, my name is Rick. I live just south of here in Shelby County. Have lived in Alabama on and off all my life. Kind of grew up in Michigan, lived in Texas for a while, and Florida for a couple of years, and I always end up back in Alabama for some reason. It keeps pulling me back. I first started getting sick around 2001. And that's when everything really kind of hit with HIV. I was going to a little doc in a box place, and they kept saying, okay, you've got bronchitis. And a visiting doctor came in one day and says, let me send you to a specialist. And the specialist said, may I do an HIV test? And I said, sure. Of course, I knew what the outcome was going to be. But didn't hear anything from him, and then a few months later ended up in the emergency room at a hospital here in Birmingham. And that's when everything just kind of hit the fan, so to speak.
Is there anything that surprised you about HIV when you were first diagnosed?
Well, it had come a long way. Because as I mentioned, I lived through the basic onset. I was living in Houston, Texas. And everyone was working hard. And of course, we would hit the happy hour after work and then party on the weekends and have a good time. And then we started noticing faces were disappearing. You didn't know everyone in the bar, but there were faces when you would go out to have a drink after work that you were used to seeing. And you started noticing that those faces were disappearing. And then all of a sudden you would have a friend who would quit a job, sell a house, and just move. And then that's when we really started hearing about a gay cancer, was what first hit. And then we started hearing about GRID and then AIDS and HIV. But by that time, it was a full-blown pandemic.
And when you noticed the faces disappearing, did you have a slight insight or belief of what could have been happening?
Well, at that time, we didn't know. Because in publications that we had in the bars, we would hear about some gay men in San Francisco and New York that were dying, but they were dying from a gay cancer. And you don't catch cancer. That just does not happen. And so it was not anything that was really on the front burner for anyone. It was, okay, well, it's happening there, it's happening over there, but here I am in the middle of the country. There's nothing happening here. And so when you're in a big city and then you stop seeing faces, you go, okay, people are leaving, they're moving, they're going to other places, there are other bars, you just stop seeing them. But then it started to happen frequently, and that was when sort of the red flags started to come out. And that's when you really started thinking, okay, maybe there's something else going on here.
So during the pandemic that occurred in the 80s, did you have any friends that you noticed were missing from the bars or your local hangouts? And if you did you believe that they had passed from the disease?
To begin with, no. It was just normal faces, like I said, that I thought I should see, but I had stopped seeing. And then it wasn't any close personal friends, it was friends of friends. And then it started hitting close to home. People that I actually knew. you would see people start to lose weight. And that's when it really started getting strange in the gay community, because you were afraid to ask, are you on a diet? What are you doing? You working out? It's you questions got stifled. You were afraid to ask anything because you did not really want to know the answer. And after a while, it sort of just exploded. And there was someone that I knew or had talked to and had some type of relationship with that was either dying or had died, sometimes once a week. It was nothing unusual to have a funeral once a week.
So if you were looking back at your first initial point of diagnosis to where you are now, did you think back then that you would be able to live the life that you're currently living now?
I wasn't thinking that far ahead, because at the time I was extremely sick. I was diagnosed with PCP, pneumocystis pneumonia, and I was extremely sick and spent most of that summer in the hospital. Ended up in ICU 2 or 3 times. There was a couple of times that my doctors had the family come in because they weren't sure if I was going to make it through the night. But at that point, I was just too stubborn to die. I mean, it wasn't going to happen to me. I was going to make it. And so death was never there for me. I wasn't going to let that get to me. Death wasn't going to embrace me. I was going to embrace life. And I think that's what helped me. My whole attitude about HIV just completely changed. And that's, I think, the reason I made it through and what's helped me to get to where I am today.
Are you worried about getting older and living with HIV?
Yes, I am. That's something that I think about every day. I'm worried about the effects of long-term antiretroviral use, because we don't know what it's going to do. I mean, I have been on it for 17 years. There's people that I know who've been on it for 20, 25, some 30 years. We don't know what it's going to do. We know it increases the aging process. It doesn't get rid of the inflammation that goes on in our bodies, and so that's continuing to go on. I mean, we will have an undetectable viral load. We have healthy CD4 counts, but there's still inflammation. There's still a lot going on in our bodies that we don't know about. And so, yes, this is something that I'm still worried about. And it's not just the HIV. It's once you get to a certain point in life, especially at my age, I also realize that there's many things that happened to me and things that I went through in the 80s that I have not dealt with yet. Like, how did I make it? Why am I still here when I lost so many friends and people that I knew? Why am I here? Why did I make it? Why did I not die when they did? It's just, I think it's survivor's guilt. And I think a lot of us that have made it through are having to suddenly, once we get to this age, we're having to start figuring out how to deal with that.
Thank you, Rick, for for joining our conversation and sharing your life experiences. And to the viewers out there, I want to remind you to be honest, be transparent, and love the skin that you're in. If you're in need of services or other educational tools, visit our website at adph.org. And remember, start talking Alabama.